an important indication of emergent structures of feeling. Now, I also have a problem with the globalizing force of the publication of things like Harry Potter or whatever. But there is an argument that this brings many young people to reading, and that from that kind of initial engagement with the written word, they then move into all kinds of other more sophisticated forms of reading. But that seems to me to be distracted from what I think was a really interesting question, which is about the fragmentation of Britain and the breakup of Britain, Scottish nationalism, obviously, Welsh nationalism. Welsh nationalism is perhaps the most interesting because it's the most telling comparative for the Malaysian experience. Up until the late 1950s, early 1960s, the policy of the British government was to eradicate the Welsh language, and you could be beaten in school for speaking in Welsh and so on and so forth. It was only a very small number of Welsh nationalists who managed to maintain the Welsh language, and then I think it was by the late 70s, there was suddenly a reversal in the way people understood multilingualism and polyglotism and so forth, and we began to celebrate the Welsh language, and we celebrated Welsh medium schools, and this was part of a recognition that took place, I think, across the British Isles of the value of the local, of the value of smaller indigenous groupings, that the nation-state the breakup of Britain was a serious concern, and then the whole political movement was towards devolution. So there has been, for Wales specifically, obviously quite extensive devolution, and that has been in parallel with the re-emergence of the Welsh language as a strong force. But Anglo-Welsh writing in English, is enormously vibrant, and that's partly because of the very dialogue between the Welsh language and the English language. It's a very distinctive cultural tradition, just as some of the Gaelic and the Irish traditions are, again, different from mainstream, urban, metropolitan British writing. I mean, maybe the most interesting writer in Britain today, there are many interesting writers, but one is Kazuo Ishiguro, who didn't speak English till he was 6. Japanese, but all of his writing has been in English, and the mode of his English is unlike any other English author who is writing, and what he's able to explore, and he's very self-conscious about his language being, what he says is, at an angle or at a tangent to the mainstream of British writing. One thing that I didn't talk about in the talk was this term that Edward Said, a post-colonial critic, used, which was the multiplication of margins, and this sense that there were many more narratives were being enabled and given voice during the long period of decolonisation. But at the end of Edward Said's life, he finished up with a book which was called Humanism and Democratic Culture. And in some ways this brings us back to the multiversity, because it was the sense that we do in fact still share many things. And after that long period of post-colonial theory, which was trying to resist the idea of the universal values that maybe Macaulay embedded, the kind of dead white English males, there's now an attempt to retrieve, I think philosophically, I love that quote from Levinas, by the way, to retrieve the common grounds of our humanity, such as they are. Anyway.
More questions? Okay, please. Question, I hope it's not going to be a comment again. Yes, this is the last question. I'm not going to allow anything more.
حوزه مطالعات فرهنگی رو حوزه مطالعات فرهنگی به یه معنا جایگاه مرگ جامعه شناسی هم هستش و علوم جامعه شناسی.
The area of cultural studies is in a way the death of social studies.
برخی‌ها این مطلب رو بیان میکنن و در واقع به نظر من مرگ جامعه شناسی نیست. جامعه شناسی مدرن باید به اینجا میرسه.
But in my opinion, some people raise this issue, but in my opinion, it's not the death of social studies. Modern sociology should have reached such a point.
و این رویکردی که شما دارید از این منظر به نوعی تکثرگرایی، تکثر فرهنگی میرسه و تکثرگرایی فرهنگی.
And your current approach in a way leads to cultural pluralism.
علم مدرن حقیقتش برای دفاع از خودش همینه و جز این نیست. نهایت علم مدرن باید به اینجا میرسی و حقیقتش جز این نیست.
Therefore, the essence of modern science is nothing but this, and it would reach such a point.
شما هم که از این منظر به فرهنگ‌های دیگه دارید نگاه می‌کنید، به نظرم هنوز توی سیطره فرهنگ مدرن دارید.
And when you look at cultures from this viewpoint, you are still under the same dominance of modern culture.
این بد نیستش، نکته خوبی است، اما من میخوام که بگم این لازم است که ببینیم آیا فرهنگ‌های دیگه میتونن از منظر شما خودشون رو ببینن و همچنان زنده باشن.
This is not bad, but I want to know whether it's possible for other cultures to use this viewpoint to understand themselves.
و یه نکته دیگه، آیا شما میخواید تلاش بکنید که از منظر فرهنگ‌های دیگه هم خودتون رو ببینید؟
And you want to attempt and to try to see yourself from other viewpoints, from the cultural viewpoints of others.
Okay, two things very quick. I see the point of the question. First of all, I hope that I located my intellectual project and emergence within the very specifically British context of a change in the disciplinary structures. Second, in Britain there was no indigenous sociology. Sociology was only introduced into Britain in 1956. So Britain is in many ways quite odd in its relation to continental social studies. That having been said, there is much and my final point would therefore be that the space that we found in the classes here on the Malaysia campus that cultural studies provided was the only space within our degree program for the discussion of some topics. And it was certainly the only place where our students had the opportunity, absolutely, to talk about their own cultures and concepts and their problems with the concepts of the British tradition. So certainly, I mean, Linda Tuwai-Smith, you must probably know, the attempt to decolonize cultural studies is critically important. Cultural studies is a space for a change of paradigm.
انشالله که شما بتونید اینطور قدم‌هایی رو بردارید و این به نظر من این گفتگوها مسیر خوبی اگر وقت بود این بحث رو میتونستید.
I hope that inshallah in the near future you would be able to do such things, and if there was more time we would, or maybe a private discussion we can have together and talk about this issue.
So give these three people a big hand for being here. And you have honorably discharged your duties, and you can have a dinner right now. Now just give them the official program. What's going to be now?